My father raised his glass and said, "Natalie, you should learn from your brother, Daniel. Stop wasting time on that foolish startup of yours." Laughter rippled around the table. I forced a smile, then the dining room TV lit up. Breaking news. Natalie Walker, secret billionaire behind Ironclad Systems revealed, net worth, $11.2 billion. Mom's fork clattered to the floor. Daniel's smirk collapsed. I stood, slid my chair back, and whispered, "Excuse me. My board is waiting." And that was only the beginning. Before I dive in, hit like and tell me where you're watching from. It's strange looking back now how ordinary those years felt, like I was just moving through life in the shadow of my brother. Daniel was the golden child, the one teachers praised, the one my parents showed off to their friends. Daniel made honor roll again. Mom would beam at dinner. Daniel's professor says he's Ivy League material, and me, I was the afterthought, the one they'd half-heartedly pat on the shoulder before asking, "So, are you still playing around with that little computer project of yours?" I still remember the day I brought home my first prototype, a rough circuit board wired together in my cramped apartment. I'd skipped meals for days, pouring every ounce of energy into making it work. My hands were shaking with excitement when I showed Dad, thinking, hoping he'd finally see me. He looked at the board, frowned, and said, "That's nice, Natalie, but maybe you should think about law school or at least something practical." Daniel laughed in the corner, tossing me a look that said it all. "You'll never measure up." Those little moments pile up heavier than you realize. I learned to hide my victories. The small grants I won from university competitions. The angel investor who gave me my first $20,000 check. The night my code finally scaled past 1 million users in testing. None of it mattered to them. To my parents, I was still the kid with the foolish startup. To Daniel, I was the punchline at family dinners. I used to think maybe I was the problem, that I wasn't impressive enough, that my dreams were too strange, too unrealistic. But then I remembered the hours no one else saw. Nights when the apartment walls hummed with the sound of my servers, when I fell asleep with half-eaten ramen by my keyboard, when my fingers blistered from typing, but I refused to stop. Success wasn't a question of if for me. It was always a question of when. But family has a way of making you doubt yourself. There was the Christmas party when Dad introduced Daniel to his business friends as our pride and joy, and introduced me as our daughter. She's dabbling in tech. I stood there holding my paper cup of eggnog, smiling like it didn't cut straight through me. Another time, Mom pulled me aside after church and whispered, "Maybe it's time to stop embarrassing yourself, Natalie. Your brother can help you get a real job." Her words weren't cruel on the surface, but they carried the sharp edge of dismissal. I nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and went home to write another 2,000 lines of code. If you've ever been underestimated, you know it can feel like gasoline poured over fire. Every rejection, every laugh behind your back, every time someone looks at you and sees less. It doesn't just sting, it fuels you. And it fueled me for years. While Daniel strutted around in tailored suits bragging about internships and connections, I sat quietly at my secondhand desk, building something they couldn't even imagine. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their belief. I needed only the silence, the glow of my screen, the feeling of moving closer to something enormous. Every sacrifice, the missed birthdays, the skipped vacations, the loneliness, I carried it because I knew. One day, they would see. One day, the startup they mocked would become the empire they never believed possible. And so when Dad raised his glass at that dinner table, comparing me to Daniel, telling me to stop wasting my life, it wasn't the first time I'd heard those words, but it would be the last. The night it all cracked open didn't feel special at first. It was just another one of those mandatory family dinners, the ones where Mom fussed over the table settings, Dad invited his business friends, and Daniel strutted in like the star attraction. I almost didn't go. I had 3 acquisitions closing in Asia and a board meeting lined up. But Mom insisted, and part of me still carried that old hope maybe this time would be different. I walked in wearing a plain black sweater and jeans, the kind of outfit that made me blend into the background. Daniel arrived in a tailored suit, his Rolex flashing under the chandelier. The comparison started before I even sat down. "Look at Daniel," one of Dad's friends said admiringly. sharp, confident, just like his father. And then came the punch. Dad raised his glass, cleared his throat, and looked straight at me. "Natalie," he said, his tone heavy with disappointment, "you should learn from your brother. Stop wasting time on that foolish startup of yours. Daniel's the pride of this family." The words weren't new. I'd heard versions of them all my life. But that night, something inside me shifted. I smiled faintly as if it didn't matter, but deep down I felt a line being drawn. Maybe they thought I'd laugh it off. Maybe they thought I'd sit there quietly like always. Then out of nowhere, the dining room TV flickered to life. Someone must have left it on mute in the background because suddenly bold red letters scrolled across the screen, breaking news. The room turned toward it. My chest tightened as I saw my own face appear. Identity revealed, the anchor's voice cut through the chatter. After years in stealth mode, the mysterious force behind Ironclad Systems is confirmed. Founder and CEO Natalie Walker, net worth $11.2 billion. The room went dead silent. My mother's fork clattered against the china. Daniel's smirk faltered into open shock. Dad coughed into his wine glass, sputtering. His friends leaned forward, squinting at the screen as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. I stayed perfectly still, letting the silence hang heavy. Inside, my heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was release. All those years of doubt, all those nights alone, building what they dismissed as nothing, it was right there in bold headlines for the world to see. Mom finally broke the silence. "This must be a mistake," she whispered, almost pleading. "Natalie, Ironclad Systems." As if on cue, the dining room doors swung open. Marcus, my CFO, stepped in, holding a tablet glowing with live numbers. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, scanning the stunned faces, "but the story's out. Ms. Walker, your valuation just jumped to $11.8 billion after the market reaction. We're receiving calls from Singapore, London, and Dubai headquarters." I rose from my chair, slowly smoothing the hem of my sweater. "Thank you, Marcus," I said calmly, as if this were just another meeting. Then I glanced at my parents, at Daniel, at the entire room that had treated me like I was nothing. "Excuse me," I whispered. "My board is waiting." The sound of my chair sliding back against the hardwood floor echoed louder than any applause Daniel had ever received. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. And I didn't throw their words back in their faces. I didn't need to. The truth had already detonated in the middle of that polished dining room, louder than anything I could have said. As I walked out, Marcus at my side, I could feel every pair of eyes on me. My parents' frozen Daniel, pale and slack-jawed Dad's friends, whispering urgently to each other. I didn't turn back. Let them stew in their silence. The moment the cool night air hit my face, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications poured in. CNBC, Bloomberg, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal. The headlines were all the same. The invisible billionaire revealed. Stock tickers screamed across my screen. My company's valuation was climbing in real time. I slid into the back of my car, Marcus handing me the tablet. "We've already scheduled a call with Singapore," he said. "The Prime Minister's office wants confirmation about the infrastructure deal." I nodded, scanning the numbers. Billion after billion rolled upward like the universe was finally keeping score. And yet my chest wasn't tight with anxiety. It was calm. I'd spent 5 years building Ironclad Systems in silence, in the shadows, brick by brick, acquisition by acquisition. Tonight wasn't chaos. It was the unveiling of something inevitable. Meanwhile, the calls from my family kept flooding in. 10 from Mom, 12 from Dad, 3 voicemails from Daniel that all sounded the same disbelief, straining into panic. I didn't answer any of them. For years, I'd bent to their opinions, craved their approval, let their doubt define me. Tonight, I chose silence. Instead, I poured myself into work. I drafted responses to governments, negotiated contracts, finalized an acquisition we'd been chasing for months. By midnight, Ironclad controlled an even larger slice of the tech industry than we had that morning. Every signature, every deal was a quiet blade drawn against the family that had mocked me for dreaming too big. The next morning, the world's headlines carried my name, Natalie Walker, the secret architect of modern tech. The startup they laughed at now valued higher than Microsoft and Apple combined. Interviews piled up, invitations from governments, private jets waiting on tarmacs, and my family, they were drowning. I heard through whispers that Dad's business friends had already called him asking why he never mentioned his daughter's empire. Mom's country club, the one that had rejected me 3 times, suddenly extended me a personal invitation. Daniel's company stock had started sliding investors, realizing Ironclad controlled the very chip supply his firm relied on. Did I gloat? Did I march back into their mansion to rub it in? No, I didn't have to. Silence was louder than any revenge. All I had to do was keep moving forward. Let the empire speak for me. Sometimes the sharpest counterattack isn't fire or fury. It's the sound of a phone buzzing with missed calls you'll never return. By sunrise, the war had begun, not in boardrooms or stock markets, but in my voicemail. "Sweetheart, it's Mom." The first message chimed her voice tight, almost rehearsed. "I hope you know how proud we are of you. Why don't you come by for dinner tonight? Just the family." The next was Dad's. "Natalie, listen. We should talk business. With my experience and your company, we could really make something of this." His tone dripped with the same authority he'd used all my life, as if nothing had changed. Then came Daniel, less polished, more frantic. "Natalie, we need to discuss the chip supply. Ironclad can't just look we're family, right? Don't do this to me." The irony nearly made me laugh. For years, I was the nuisance, the kid wasting her time. Now overnight, I was leverage. I ignored every call. Silence was still my weapon. But I couldn't ignore what happened next. They showed up unannounced at my office. From the 72nd floor of Ironclad's glass headquarters, I saw them through the lobby cameras. Dad straightening his tie nervously, Mom gripping her handbag like a lifeline, Daniel pacing like a caged animal. For once, they looked small. Marcus appeared at my door. "Do you want me to send them away?" I thought about it. God, how tempting it was. But no, I wanted them to see. I wanted them to step inside the empire they swore would never exist. When they entered, their jaws dropped at the rows of analysts, the walls of live market data, the quiet efficiency of a company running the world's infrastructure. Daniel's eyes darted to the global map glowing across the main screen, our servers pulsing across continents. Dad cleared his throat, trying to mask his awe. "Impressive operation you've got here." "It's not an operation," I corrected coolly. "It's the backbone of modern technology." They exchanged glances, scrambling for footing. Mom leaned in her voice, soft, coaxing. "Darling, all we ever wanted was the best for you. We didn't mean what we said back then. You know we love you." Her words should have warmed me. Instead, they rang hollow, brittle, like glass. Daniel finally snapped. "You're destroying my company. Do you realize Ironclad controls every chip we need? You can't do this. It's not fair." I met his panic with calm. "Business is business, Daniel. Isn't that what Dad always said?" He flinched, but I didn't linger. I turned back to Marcus. "Send them the standard partnership documents. If they want supply, they'll pay market price. No exceptions." The meeting was over. As security escorted them out, I caught my reflection in the glass wall, composed, unshaken, a woman no longer begging for approval. For the first time, I realized the struggle wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. It happened 3 days later. I was reviewing a deal in the executive boardroom when Marcus leaned in. "Ma'am, they're here again. This time, they won't leave." I already knew who he meant. My family. I sighed, closed the folder, and said, "Send them in." The doors swung open. Dad walked in first, his confidence cracked, but not gone. Mom followed, her face powdered with the kind of effort that said she'd practiced this moment in the mirror. Daniel trailed behind, pale, jittery, the mask of superiority long since stripped away. The silence was thick until Dad finally spoke. "Natalie, we were wrong." 3 words I'd never thought I'd hear. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was a cool detachment. Wrong about what, Dad? that my company was a joke that I should give up. He swallowed hard. We underestimated you. We didn't see what you were building, and now we need your help. There it was. Not love, not pride, need. Daniel stepped forward, his voice cracking. My company's bleeding. Without your supply chain, we can't survive. You can't just cut us off. We're family. Family. That word again, thrown like a life raft only when convenient. I stood slowly, the skyline of the city glowing behind me, casting my shadow across the room. Family, I repeated softly. Where was family when you mocked my startup? Where was family when you told me to quit to be more like Daniel? Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. I turned to Dad. You spent my whole life telling me, business is business. You said it when you passed me over for opportunities. You said it when Daniel was praised and I was ignored. Well, you were right. His face fell. Natalie, I didn't mean. But I cut him off. Business is business. An ironclad doesn't do favors. Not for competitors. Not even for blood. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that burns deeper than shouting. Mom finally whispered, We're losing you. I shook my head. No, you lost me years ago when you decided my worth before I had a chance to prove it. Marcus appeared in the doorway with his tablet. Ms. Walker, the EU delegation is waiting for you. I nodded. Then I turned back to my family one last time. This boardroom is my family now. These screens, these deals, this empire. You don't have to understand it, you just have to live with it. Their faces blurred as I walked out, but I'll never forget the echo of my father's old words, turned back on him, final and sharp. Business is business. The headlines kept coming for weeks. Natalie Walker, the shadow billionaire who rewrote tech. The startup they laughed at now, an empire. Every time I saw those words, I thought about the years my own family couldn't see me. And yet I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The silence I carried for so long had already done its work. I didn't need apologies shouted or banners of regret. Their faces in that boardroom, their shock, their desperation, that was enough. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire and fury. Sometimes it's quieter, sharper. It's walking away without raising your voice. It's letting the world speak the truth you always knew. I built Ironclad to prove to myself I could. But in the end, it proved something else entirely, that the girl they dismissed had become the woman who held the power to redraw the map. I don't crave their validation anymore. I don't wait for their praise. My life isn't measured by their approval. It's measured in what I chose to build when no one believed in me. And the sweetest part, they'll never underestimate me again. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family, told your dreams were foolish? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story hit home, tap like and subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest success is the loudest revenge.
My name is Cynthia Garcia. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 3 years I lived my life in orbit around a man who swore he was headed for the stars. His name was Augustine, and he wanted nothing more than to escape gravity, escape me, as I would later find out. For 3 years, my world revolved around him. I was steady, predictable, a junior data analyst at a mid-sized firm, clocking in 9 to 5, never missing a deadline, never breaking a promise. Augustine was the opposite. He was brilliant, restless, and consumed by his dream of getting into one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. We built our rhythm around that dream. I worked, he studied. I covered rent when his tutoring money came up short. I cooked, I cleaned, I researched the strongest coffee beans to keep him awake through his all-nighters. I was the safety net he never asked for, but always used. I thought it was love. Looking back, maybe it was devotion or delusion. The night it ended, I remember exactly what I cooked, a slow-simmered beef stew, his favorite. The aroma filled our small apartment, wrapping me in warmth that I mistook for security. Augustine sat hunched over his laptop on the couch, the bluish glow painting his face like a ghost. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed in a thin line. To anyone else it would have looked like focus. To me, it was just Augustine in his natural state, lost in a world where I was a footnote, I hummed softly as I portioned leftovers into containers, trying to fight off the creeping exhaustion of another long workday. My mind wandered toward the future, the one I thought we were building together. 2 weeks earlier, his acceptance letter had arrived, a fat envelope with ivy-covered buildings smiling up from glossy photos. He'd screamed when he opened it. I had screamed too. We drank the bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a someday milestone. I thought that milestone was ours. I imagined us solving the logistics together long distance for a while. Maybe a job transfer. Maybe I'd move later. None of it mattered as long as we were a team. I placed the stew in the fridge and walked to the couch. I bent down and pressed a kiss to the crown of his head. "Don't work too late," I murmured. He didn't look up. His voice was flat rehearsed. "Cynthia, we need to talk about my future. Our future as you see it." A cold knot formed in my stomach. The hum in my chest stopped. His words weren't an invitation, they were a verdict waiting to be read. I sank onto the couch beside him, the scent of stew still on my hands. My heart beat unevenly, searching for a rhythm in the silence. Agustin closed his laptop and set it aside. His posture was casual, too casual. Fingers interlaced in his lap like a CEO about to fire an employee. His eyes, though, carried the steel of finality. "You've been amazing, Cynthia." He began, his tone almost clinical. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You know that, right?" I nodded stiffly. My lips tried to curl into a smile, but it trembled. Here it comes, I thought. Some confession about another woman, some secret I hadn't seen. Secret. But no, his betrayal was colder, sharper than infidelity. "This program, it's the biggest opportunity of my life," he said, staring past me at a future that no longer had my shadow in it. "And I can't be held back by someone who's comfortable with just stability, with a 9-to-5 job and a quiet life." The words sliced clean through me. "I wasn't holding you back, Agustin. I was supporting you. I've been the one paying for everything so you could focus on this." He flinched just slightly, then smoothed his expression into a placid mask. "That's exactly the problem. It's too comfortable. I need to be challenged. I need to constantly fight to keep up. Not live in a life where things are just handed to me." I swallowed hard, my voice a whisper. "Are you calling me a handout?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'm saying, you're a weight on my future. It's not fair to either of us. I need independence to prove I can do this on my own. I can't take you with me. Not now, maybe not ever." The silence roared in my ears. His logic twisted itself into a noble mask, framing his selfishness as sacrifice. He cast himself as the martyr and me as the anchor he had to cut loose. I rose slowly, my hands numb. I walked to the bedroom, the stew's warm scent now mocking me. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and began packing. Behind me, Augustine stayed seated, watching silent, not pleading, not even regretful. I zipped the suitcase, turned to face him. My voice was flat, stripped of tears. "So what you're saying is, this is it?" "Yes." His answer came quickly. Too quickly. "I'm sorry, but this is what I need. A clean break. No ties. I need to be free." I nodded once. Just once. A gesture final as a slammed door. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't demand an explanation. I simply packed a duffel bag with essentials and walked to the door. The stew still simmered faintly in the air, a cruel reminder of the home I thought we'd shared. Hand on the doorknob, I turned back. He looked small in that moment, smaller than I had ever seen him. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Augustine," I said softly. It was the last thing I ever said to him in that apartment. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the silence on both sides. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence was mine alone. The first week after I left, Agustin felt like walking through fog. I found a 1-bedroom apartment on the opposite side of the city. Cheap, barely furnished its walls, stained with years of other tenants' loneliness. The place had no sunlight, no kitchen island, no laughter echoing in its corners. Just 4 walls, a sagging mattress, and a silence so heavy it felt alive. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, pretend to function, go home, stare at nothing. At the office, my coworkers' voices blurred into background noise. Their jokes, their weekend plans, their small talk, all of it washed over me like static. I typed my reports, hit my deadlines, and smiled at the right times. But inside, I was hollow. At night, I'd come home to the apartment's emptiness. Sometimes I'd order takeout just to hear another human voice, even if it was just a delivery driver asking me to sign a receipt. Friends texted me, called me, tried to drag me out. I brushed them off with vague excuses. I'm just tired, busy with work, next week maybe. The truth, I was ashamed. Ashamed of how completely I had built my life around Augustin. Ashamed that when he cut me loose, I didn't know who I was without him. One evening, while unpacking boxes I had shoved into a corner, I stumbled on something I hadn't seen in years, a battered leather notebook. My handwriting spilled across the pages, sketches of an app interface, flowcharts, lists of ideas I'd once believed in. My old dream. Before Augustine, before his ambitions consumed our lives, I'd wanted to build a startup, a niche lifestyle tech platform that combined habit tracking with community support. I'd believed it could help people help me even become better versions of themselves. I traced my finger over the sketches, the ink smudged from years of neglect. A tiny fire stirred in my chest, fragile but real. And then his voice returned sharp as glass. "Cynthia, you're not seriously wasting time on that, are you?" Augustine's laugh from 2 years ago echoed in my memory. We'd been at a dinner party with his grad school friends. My notebook had been on the coffee table. He'd picked it up, flipped through it, and with a smirk held it out like a prop. "Look at this Cynthia's cute little app idea. She thinks she's going to be the next Steve Jobs." His friends laughed politely, awkwardly. I wanted to shrink into the floor. Augustine didn't notice or didn't care. He kept going. "She's a data analyst. She should stick to spreadsheets. Leave the big ideas to people who actually dream big." I'd smiled that night, my cheeks burning, my chest collapsing inwards. Later, when I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off. "Babe, I was joking. Don't be so sensitive. You know I love you." But love doesn't humiliate you in front of strangers. I snapped the notebook shut. My hands trembled not with sadness, but with something sharper, anger, not just at him, but at myself, at how easily I had abandoned my own ambitions to fuel his. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor, notebook, open pen in hand. For hours, I filled page after page with updates, revisions, new ideas. By 3 a.m., my apartment was littered with Post-its and crumpled paper. For the first time since leaving Augustine, the silence didn't suffocate me. It held me, protected me. The next days blurred into a rhythm. I went to work as usual, but when I came home, I transformed. My old laptop hummed as I relearned coding basics. I sketched prototypes on index cards. I scoured online forums for startup advice. Hours passed without me noticing. The takeout boxes piled up again, but this time it wasn't out of apathy. It was because I was too absorbed to care. I wasn't doing this for Augustine, not to prove him wrong, not even for revenge. I was doing this for me, to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd abandoned in his shadow. Still, loneliness crept in. Some nights, the silence stretched too wide and my pen stalled. The temptation to scroll through his social media accounts burned in me. But I resisted. I couldn't risk reopening wounds. Instead, I forced myself out of the apartment once a week. I found a local women in tech meetup. At first, I sat in the back quiet, convinced I didn't belong. But gradually, I began speaking, sharing my idea. And when I did, something unexpected happened. People listened. Really listened. One woman, a UX designer named Leah, leaned in, her eyes bright. "That's actually a fantastic concept. Have you thought about how to monetize it?" I blinked, stunned. "No one's ever asked me that before." Leah smiled. "Well, maybe you've been showing it to the wrong people." That night, walking back to my apartment under flickering streetlights, I felt lighter than I had in years. Augustine's words still haunted me. "You're a weight on my future." But maybe he was right in a way he hadn't intended. Maybe I was a weight because I'd been weighing myself down by carrying someone else's dreams instead of my own. And now finally I was ready to put them down. The weeks that followed blurred into a new kind of rhythm. By day, I was still the dependable Cynthia Garcia, quiet, efficient, and invisible in my cubicle at the data analytics firm. But by night, I became someone else, a version of myself I thought I'd buried years ago. I'd toss my work blazer onto the couch, kick off my heels, and trade Excel spreadsheets for lines of code. My apartment transformed into something alive, sticky notes plastered across the walls, scraps of paper covering the kitchen counter, my laptop glowing in the darkness like a heartbeat. I stopped buying groceries in bulk. It felt pointless. Instead, takeout containers stacked up on the counter, colorful badges of late-night progress. Sleep became optional. 2 hours one night, 4 the next. I didn't care. The exhaustion didn't weigh me down, it lifted me. For the first time in years, I wasn't orbiting anyone else's life. I was building my own. Still, the loneliness lingered. It crept in at odd moments when I brushed my teeth and realized there was no toothbrush beside mine, or when I cooked a simple meal and caught myself plating it for two out of habit. Augustine's absence was everywhere, in the silence of the apartment, in the ache in my chest when I remembered his laugh, or the way he used to stroke my hair absent-mindedly while reading. But every time the ache rose, I reminded myself of the dinner party humiliation of the night he'd told me I was a weight. That memory became my shield, my reminder not to cave to nostalgia. I unfollowed him on social media, deleted old photos, stopped responding to mutual friends who only called to update me on how well Augustine was doing. Let them think he was thriving. I didn't need to know. One night, after hours of debugging a prototype, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the mess of sticky notes. Half-finished flowcharts sketched wireframes, bold arrows pointing to the words habit, community, growth. I remembered something Augustine once told me when I'd tried to explain my app idea to him. People don't want accountability, Cynthia. They want convenience. Your idea is cute, but it's not serious. You're not serious. The bitterness in his voice had cut me back then, but now those words became fuel. Every keystroke, every diagram, every late-night breakthrough was my rebuttal. Cute little app idea. Watch me. The Women in Tech meetup became my anchor. Every Tuesday night, I sat among strangers, turned allies, who nodded as I spoke, challenged me with questions, and reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. Leah, the UX designer, became a friend. She had a quick wit and a soft laugh that made everything feel lighter. Sometimes after meetups, we'd grab coffee and she'd help me refine user flows. Don't overcomplicate it, she told me one night, sketching on a napkin. Keep it clean. If your app makes people feel overwhelmed, they won't come back. Her confidence rubbed off on me each time she looked me in the eye and said, "This is good, Cynthia. Really good." I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, belief. The irony wasn't lost on me. Augustine had spent years pushing me aside to chase his dream. And here I was, finally chasing mine, not to compete with him, not to outshine him, but because I finally remembered how to belong to myself. Months passed. My prototype became a beta version. I tested it with the women in the group, gathering feedback, fixing bugs. Slowly, users began trickling in, friends of friends, strangers online. The first time I saw a stranger sign up, my heart pounded like I'd won the lottery. The app didn't make money yet, but it was alive, breathing, real. Meanwhile, at work, I earned a small promotion. My manager praised my dedication without realizing my real dedication was waiting at home in my laptop. With the raise, I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, nothing fancy, but brighter, cleaner mine. For the first time since leaving Augustine, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Still, the shadows lingered. Some nights when exhaustion hit hard, I'd dream of him. Dreams where he apologized, where he held me and said he was wrong. I'd wake up with my pillow damp from tears I didn't want to admit I'd shed. But each morning, I sat back at my desk, reopened my laptop, and reminded myself the future I was building had no space for the past. Then, one evening after a meetup, Leah turned to me and said something I wasn't ready for. "You know, Cynthia," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear, "you're kind of inspiring." I laughed, nearly choking on my coffee. Me inspiring. I've been living on noodles and cold brew for weeks. "I'm serious," she said. "Most people would have crumbled after what you went through. You didn't just survive, you built something. That takes guts." Her words lodged in my chest, warm and heavy. For so long, I'd believed Augustine's version of me, the stable, boring one, the handout, the weight. Hearing Leah call me inspiring felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Walking home that night, the city lights flickering above me, I realized something. For months, I'd thought I was working in spite of Augustine, that I was fueled by proving him wrong. But the truth was simpler, scarier. I wasn't building my startup because of him. I was building it because deep down I'd always wanted to. I just needed to remember. And for the first time, I whispered it to myself out loud into the night air. I can do this. I really can. The words didn't sound fragile anymore. They sounded true. A year passed before I realized how different my life had become. The girl who once cried into a takeout box on the floor was gone. In her place stood a woman with structure goals and something she could call her own. The app I'd been building, my cute little hobby, as Augustine once sneered, was no longer just code on a laptop. It was in beta testing with hundreds of users. People I'd never met were writing me emails saying it helped them stay accountable, helped them feel less alone. Each message lit something in me, a reminder that my work mattered. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was free. I'd also moved into a new apartment, a little bigger, a little brighter, with a window that caught the morning sun. It wasn't much, but every corner carried the stamp of me. A soft rug I picked out, a plant that somehow wasn't dying, a secondhand desk where I coded until dawn. Even my job at the firm felt different. I'd been promoted to project lead on a mid-size account. My manager praised my initiative. They had no idea that my true initiative bloomed after hours. I was still tired most of the time, but it wasn't the bone-deep, soul-crushing tiredness I'd felt when I was orbiting Agustin. This was different. This was the kind of exhaustion that came with purpose. But purpose couldn't erase shadows. Agustin rarely crossed my mind anymore. When he did, it was like remembering a book I'd read years ago, one that had left me with more questions than answers. I told myself I didn't care, that he was gone irrelevant. Then, one evening, an email popped up from an old college friend we'd both known, Eric. The subject line read simply, "Long time, Cynthia." I clicked it, smiling faintly at the nostalgia. His note was casual. At first, he'd dropped out of the same program Agustin had gotten into. He was back in the city catching up with people and wanted to see how I was doing. And then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned Agustin. Grad school was brutal, total pressure cooker. Agustin's not doing great. He's isolated, buried in debt, burned out. Honestly, he's a ghost of himself. Rumor is he's thinking of dropping out. I feel kind of bad for him, but also, not really. Anyway, hope you're doing better than he is. I read the lines 3 times. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. He'd thrown me away for independence, for freedom, for a future he claimed I was holding him back from. And now that same freedom had become his prison. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant, even smug. Instead, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, just emptiness. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment, the city buzzing faintly outside, and thought about how different our paths had become. He'd wanted me gone so he could soar. Instead, he'd crashed. Meanwhile, the weight was slowly learning how to fly. It wasn't fair. It wasn't just. But life had never cared about those words. Weeks passed, and I buried myself deeper in my work. The app grew steadily. Users multiplied. A small stream of revenue began to trickle in. Enough to cover some bills, enough to prove it wasn't just a dream. At meetups, Leah cheered every update. "See? Told you this was real," she said one night, grinning across her latte. I laughed, embarrassed. I know, but it still feels like I'm waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Cynthia, this isn't for you. Go back to being safe." Leah shook her head. "That's just his voice still in your head, not yours." Her words stung because they were true. Despite my progress, Agustin's ghost haunted me in small ways. In moments of doubt, I still heard him. "You're not serious." When bugs broke my code, I imagined his smirk. "See, I told you it wasn't practical." But every time those voices rose, I reminded myself of the real voices that mattered. The users who wrote thank you notes. Leah's encouragement. My own whispered affirmation, "I can do this." Then one evening, just as I was beginning to believe in the stability I'd built, another shadow fell across my new life. A message slipped into my inbox. Not from Eric this time, from an unknown sender. The subject line, "Hey stranger." I hovered over the email, my heartbeat quickening. I already knew who it was. Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was short, too casual. "Hey, Cynthia, it's been a long time. Just saw something that reminded me of you. How have you been?" No name, but it didn't need one. The entitlement in the tone was unmistakable. Agustin. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. It had been over a year. He had no right to step back into my life like it was still his to claim. I didn't respond. Didn't even type a draft. I simply blocked the address, shut the computer, and tried to sleep. But as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unease spread through me. I had a sinking feeling this wasn't the last time I'd hear from him. The first email I ignored. The second came a week later from a different address. The subject line, "Please, just one chance." I didn't open it. By the third attempt, I had filters set up. My inbox sent anything from him straight into junk. Out of sight, out of mind, or so, I told myself. But even without reading the words, just seeing his name appear even briefly was enough to twist my stomach into knots. It felt like someone slipping notes under a locked door. I wasn't answering, but the intrusion was constant, insistent. Then came the text messages. Unknown number. "Cynthia, I know you probably hate me. I don't blame you, but I'm not okay. Please, can we just talk?" I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, temptation prickling to lash out to remind him what he'd said the night I left, to ask if this, his collapse, was what freedom had bought him. But I didn't type a word. I blocked the number and set the phone down face first on the table. The next message came from another number. This one longer, rambling. I made a huge mistake. Grad school wasn't what I thought it would be. I lost my scholarship. I'm drowning in debt. I thought independence would make me stronger, but it just broke me. I miss us. I miss you. I'd give anything to go back. His words crawled across the screen, heavy with desperation. He painted his suffering in vivid strokes, the sleepless nights, the failed classes, the friends who'd abandoned him. He ended with, "I'll even help you with your little project. Please just let me in again." The phrase caught me. Little project. Even in his desperation, he couldn't resist diminishing me. The words didn't sting the way they once might have. This time they made me laugh, low, humorless, bitter. My little project was now supporting hundreds of active users. It was more alive than he realized, and unlike him, it was growing. That night, I sat by my window again, the city lights winking below. My phone buzzed on the desk, another number, another message waiting. I didn't open it. Instead, I whispered to myself as if reminding a stubborn shadow he chose his freedom. I chose mine. But the shadow didn't let go. A mutual friend, one of the few I hadn't cut off, called me out of the blue. His voice was uneasy. "Cynthia, listen. Augustine's been asking around. He wants your number. He says he's sorry that he needs to talk to you. He sounds bad." "Did you give it to him?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Of course not, but he keeps pushing. It's honestly kind of weird. He won't let it go." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Then tell him this: if he doesn't stop, you'll cut him off too." There was silence on the line. Then my friend said quietly, "You've really changed, Cynthia." "Good," I replied before ending the call. For days I told myself the storm would pass, that he'd eventually give up. But instead the messages escalated. Desperate emails slipped through spam filters, each one longer than the last, dripping with regret and pleas. One email was almost a confession. "I thought pushing you away would make me stronger, but all it did was prove how weak I really am. I gave up the best thing in my life for nothing. Please, I can't do this alone anymore." I read it once, then deleted it. I refused to let his downfall become my responsibility. Still late at night, the weight of his words pressed on me. I'd lie awake, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, torn between the woman I was becoming and the woman I used to be. The old Cynthia, the one who cooked, cleaned, and paid the bills, while he chased dreams, would have rushed to his side, would have soothed his wounds, carried his burden, sacrificed herself again. But that Cynthia was gone. This Cynthia knew better. The final message arrived on a rainy Friday. My phone buzzed against the desk. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something the length of the message preview maybe made me open it. It was pages long. Augustine spilled everything. The collapse of his scholarship. The debt collectors. The family who'd turned their backs on him. The professors who told him he wasn't cut out for the program. And at the very end, "I can't believe I gave up the best thing in my life for nothing. Please, Cynthia, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me alone in this." The words blurred before my eyes. Not because I was crying, I wasn't, but because I finally understood what his messages were really saying. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about regret. It was about survival. He wasn't reaching for me because he wanted me. He was reaching because he was drowning, and I was the only solid thing he remembered. But I wasn't a lifeline anymore. I was the shore he'd chosen to swim away from. And I wasn't swimming back. I set the phone down, let the rain patter against the window, and instead of answering him, I turned back to my laptop. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. My world, my work, my future. Without another thought, I began to type. The rain had finally cleared the city air, leaving the streets washed and gleaming. That morning, I put on my best coat, the tailored navy one I'd bought after my promotion, and walked into a downtown cafe with a steady heart. I wasn't there for coffee. I was there for a signature. My lawyer was already waiting in a corner booth, a stack of papers neatly clipped together. The incorporation papers, the final step that would make my startup a legitimate company. The smell of roasted beans wrapped around us as I slid into the seat, pen in hand. For once, the future didn't feel abstract. It felt like ink about to meet paper. We were halfway through reviewing the documents when the bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up at first, but then a ripple of silence passed through the room, and something a shift in the air, an instinct made me glance toward the entrance. And there he was. Augustine. But not the Augustine I remembered. Not the restless, ambitious man who had once dismissed me with icy finality. This Augustin was thinner, paler, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare trench coat. His hair was unkempt, his eyes darting nervously around the cafe, like a fugitive searching for shelter. His bag looked overstuffed, as if he carried his entire life inside it. The sight punched the air from my lungs. For a moment I froze. I wasn't prepared for this. Not here, not now. His eyes swept the cafe unfocused at first. Then they landed on me. He stopped dead in his tracks. For several seconds, neither of us moved. His face drained of color. He looked from me, to the lawyer, to the open laptop on the table, back to me. Recognition slammed into him, dragging disbelief behind it. He walked over slowly, hesitantly, as if approaching a fragile animal. "Cynthia," his voice cracked. I nodded once, keeping my expression calm, unreadable. "I can't believe it's you," he whispered. His eyes flicked over me. My coat, my polished shoes, the documents spread before me. "You look different. Successful." The word hung awkwardly between us, weighted with shame. "This is my lawyer," I said evenly, gesturing to the man beside me. "We're finalizing some paperwork." Augustine's gaze dropped to the documents. His throat bobbed. He tried for a smile, but it faltered. "I was just here to meet with a loan officer," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I'm trying to renegotiate my student debt." The irony cut through the air like glass. Me pen poised to sign incorporation papers for a growing business. Him begging for mercy from a system he thought he could conquer alone. His composure cracked. "Cynthia, please." His words tangled in his throat, spilling out clumsily. "I was a fool. I gave up the best thing I ever had for nothing. I thought I needed freedom, but all I did was destroy myself. Please, I need you. I can help with your little app thing. I'll do anything. Just take me back." The words hung between us, desperate and raw. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. A year ago, those words might have shattered me, might have made me ache to comfort him, to forgive him, but now they only confirmed what I already knew: he hadn't changed. He still didn't see me, not really. Even in his desperation, he called it my little app thing. "Funny," I said softly, my voice steady. "You once told me I was a weight on your future, but what you didn't realize is that you were a chain on mine." His face crumpled. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead again, but I raised my hand. "Letting you go was the best decision I ever made," I continued, "because it forced me to take myself seriously. It forced me to build something that you would have always seen as small as beneath you. But it isn't small, Augustine. Not anymore." Tears brimmed in his eyes. "Please, Cynthia. I've been so alone. I don't know what else to do." For the first time since I'd known him, I saw Augustin not as the towering ambition I once admired, but as a man stripped bare, desperate, broken, lost. And I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, just peace. "You needed to be free," I said quietly. "And you were right, I was holding you back. But it turns out I needed to be free too. And I am. I don't hate you, but I don't need you either." The words were calm, final. I turned back to my lawyer, picked up the pen, and signed my name on the dotted line. When I looked up again, Augustine was gone. The space where he had stood was empty, just as empty as the life I once thought I needed him to fill. Outside, the city sparkled under the washed-clean sky. I stepped out of the cafe papers in my bag and breathed deeply. The air tasted like rain and new beginnings. For the first time, the silence inside me wasn't heavy. It was freedom. When I stepped out of the cafe, the city felt different. The rain had rinsed everything clean. The pavement glistened, lights reflected like fractured diamonds, and the air tasted sharp with the scent of ozone. I tightened my coat around me and stood there for a moment, letting the cool air rush into my lungs. Augustin was gone. The man who had once defined the edges of my life, who had been my sun and my storm, had walked out of that cafe without a backward glance. Or maybe he had glanced back, maybe I just hadn't cared enough to notice. What mattered was this. For the first time in years, the silence around me was not heavy. It was expansive. It was mine. I walked home slowly, papers tucked safely in my bag, each step steady as if my body had finally found its rhythm again. I should have been shaking. Should have been replaying the encounter in my mind. But I wasn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was peaceful. Closure, I realized, wasn't loud. It didn't always come with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it was as simple as a signature on a dotted line, as quiet as watching someone walk away and not needing to follow. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window of my apartment, the one I had chosen, the one filled with my things, my work, my presence. The city stretched out before me, alive and humming. I thought back to the woman I had been a year and a half ago, quietly spooning stew into containers while a man rehearsed the words to cut me loose. I remembered the hollow apartment I moved into, the tears, the shame, the silence. And then I looked at the walls around me now, covered in sketches, notes, sticky reminders of deadlines. A home built not around someone else's ambition, but around my own. I whispered into the night, almost a prayer, almost a vow. Sometimes the greatest gift someone gives you is leaving, because in their absence, you finally hear your own voice. And I smiled, because I had. Just as I was about to close my laptop, a notification pinged in the corner of the screen. A new email. For a split second, my chest tightened. Reflex, fear. Another desperate plea from Augustine, another intrusion. But when I opened it, my breath caught. It wasn't from him. It was from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, potential investment opportunity. I clicked, heart racing. The message was short, professional, but thrilling. Ms. Garcia, I came across your beta platform through a mutual contact. I believe your work has strong potential. I'd like to set up a call to discuss funding options. Please let me know your availability. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling not with dread, but with anticipation. I thought of Augustine's words echoing from a past that no longer owned me, your little app thing. I almost laughed, because here it was not little at all. Not a hobby, not a joke, not a weight. It was my future. I closed the laptop, gently set the wine glass aside, and leaned back in my chair. My heart was still pounding, but it wasn't fear, it was momentum. Augustine's story had ended in that cafe. Mine was just beginning.